NBA All-Star break, and there's a lot of possibilities, and let's sort through it. Chris Sheridan, insider, SheridanHoops.com, is back with us here on Tiki and Tierney. Hey, Chris, how you been, buddy? What's happening?
Good, Brandon. How you been, buddy?
Doing well. I tell you, I feel like we say this every year, Chris, but I really mean it this time. I expect some volatility. I think we get a lot of moves. There's a lot of circumstances where teams, if they're honest with themselves, whether it's expiring contracts or just being unable to beat the Warriors or the Spurs, I think we get some in the first round. I think we get some serious movement. What is your overall thought on how much player movement we get in the next week or so?
Well, it's hard to tell from year to year, and the one thing that's different this year, Brandon, is that the salary cap's going to jump so high this summer, up to $90 million, that pretty much three-quarters of the teams in the NBA are going to have enough money to go out and get a max free agent. So that can work in one of two ways. It could either hinder or it could prompt trades. Because you might be willing to take on a little extra money on a long-term contract, or maybe even a guy with one extra year left, because he can fit under the cap next year. A case in point is maybe Jose Calderon of the Knicks. He's got another year left on his deal. The Knicks are going nowhere with him as a point guard. The Knicks are really looking for a new point guard. Calderon's their starter, but Calderon could be a difference maker for a playoff team as a guy who can come in off the bench, play 18, 20 minutes at the point, and shoot threes, because he remains a really good three-point shooter, and he remains a guy who can run an offense real well. So, if the Knicks make a move, it wouldn't be surprising to me if Jose Calderon is the guy that gets moved. But I think a bigger question for the Knicks is, what are you going to do with Carmelo Anthony?
Yeah.
You signed him to a long-term deal, but he's on the wrong side of 30. He's got bad knees. This is a team that's going to have to build around Kristaps Porzingis going forward, and it's a team that doesn't have that many draft picks. They don't have a first-round pick this year. They don't have a second-round pick this year, and it's very tough to build around a core of Carmelo and Kristaps Porzingis when these guys are more than a decade removed in age. So one thing to keep an eye on is whether it comes out that Carmelo Anthony is or is not willing to waive his no-trade clause. Because if he is, then I think it behooves Phil Jackson to get as much as he can for Carmelo Anthony at this point, and to start going into a more traditional rebuild. And you build the Knicks around good young players, and you restock the cabinet with the draft picks that have been given away by previous administrations.
Yeah, no, Chris, I'm looking at your website, SheridanHoops.com. There's an interesting trade you have on here for Carmelo Anthony, if he should accept it, to the Clippers with Stevenson and J.J. Redick coming back and Paul Pierce. I mean, it's interesting.
Wait, run it by the Knick fan. Go ahead. I didn't see this.
Carmelo Anthony,
Yeah,
for,
okay.
this is on Chris's site, Chris, so you can opine on this after BT does. Lance Stevenson,
Okay.
J.J. Redick,
Okay.
and Paul Pierce.
For Carmelo?
Carmelo.
Oh, I
And-
would
and a
definitely
pick.
do it.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah, if he waives his no trade call. Another team that we talked about at the top part of our show, Chris, is the Boston Celtics. Now, I think they're a surprise in some ways, and Brad Stevens has done an unbelievable job there. But you think they're in the market to bring in anyone to help them maybe challenge Toronto or even the Cleveland Cavaliers and get to the Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah, absolutely. But going back to that Clipper trade, you don't see it in the trade machine graphic, but the Clippers would be sending back draft picks to the Knicks as well.
Yeah, have to get the money right.
You don't want Redick, Pierce, and Stevenson just for Carmelo unless there's draft picks coming back as well, because only one of those guys is a productive player, and that's Redick.
Yeah.
And you do need draft picks, but Boston is a much more intriguing possibility. Look, Danny Ainge has made a move a few years ago when he brought in Kevin Garnett to put his team over the top. Right now, he's sitting on 7 first-round draft picks in the next 4 years. He's got all of his own. He's got 2 of Brooklyn's picks, which are going to be lottery picks. He's got a pick that belongs to Memphis, and he's got a pick that belongs to another team that doesn't immediately come to mind. But he had 3 players taken in the first round last year: Rozier and James Young, and then R.J. Hunter. They also drafted. He's got a nice young core with good players who are not great players, guys like Kelly Olynyk and Jared Sullinger. And I think the only guy on the roster that Danny wouldn't trade is Isaiah Thomas. But he has a wheelbarrow full of assets that he could move. And if he thinks that Boston is close enough close enough to Cleveland to be able to defeat them in a playoff series this year, then it behooves him to go out there and get a guy who can carry the team and carry a team in a playoff series. A guy who might be able to do that is Carmelo Anthony. A guy who might be able to do that is Dwight Howard. And Dwight is certainly more available at this point than Carmelo is, unless there's something going on with Carmelo that we don't know about in terms of his no-trade clause.
Yep.
And it wouldn't be surprising if that was indeed the case. Last Sunday, Carmelo's agent, Leon Rose, sat for the whole game against the Nuggets with Steve Mills, the Garden executive.